Hello, and welcome to Frankly Speaking with Frank Portinari, the podcast that gains access to real and inspiring people. Today, our guest is Reece Mack. I'll describe Reece as an ex-offender. Now he's a social activist, and we're coming on to him shortly. I'd just like to thank those who continue to support the podcast, those that subscribe, leave comments and like, etc. We would like some more subscribers. We want the channel to grow. We want to be able to invite more guests on and tell us their stories and inspire people. But we also want to keep up with previous guests and continue to support their campaigns. I'd like to thank today's sponsors who are on the shirt. It's Casual Minds Matter. And below that heading, it says checking in on male mental health. This is a new initiative. It's been started by some friends of ours in Burnley. It's attracting a lot of attention. A lot of people who need help have started to attend the meetings, and we intend to fully support that process. Again, we continue to support Change Your Life, Put Down Your Knife, a fantastic anti-knife campaign. A great team of fellas there working hard. I'll say fellas, there's obviously some ladies as well. And again, we don't want to forget the Alzheimer's Society because of the wonderful work that they do in looking after people and patients and their families. I'd also like to thank Gary from Mack the Hat Media for all his help, advice and support. But the main man today is Reece Mack. So Reece, I'd like to welcome you to Frankly Speaking.
Thank you for the opportunity, Frank. It's lovely to meet you.
Yeah, it's good to catch up at last, mate. Good to catch up. Let's get rid of the... I do this every time. Let's get rid of the glasses. Drive me nuts. But what we'll start off with, Reece, is your hometown. Where was you born?
I was born in Huddersfield Violin Family, where I was born. So that's obviously my hometown. It's where I still live now.
Yeah.
So obviously we started off. Obviously I was born, and obviously growing up, I don't really want this. Obviously, I understand that growing up has been important because of where I grew up. But yeah. I don't want to. The last thing I want to do on this interview is say that's the reason why I turned into the person I was, if that makes sense. Because I think we're all given. I think obviously it's Great Britain. We're all given opportunities and education and blah blah blah. What we do and how we as people grow from that, I don't think is really anything to do with your upbringing. But it obviously does play a part in that. I understand that as well.
Yeah.
So I was obviously brought up in a single parent child at home. My dad was in prison.
Right, okay.
So my mum brought us up. We lived in a little area called Crossland Moor, which is just on the outskirts of Huddersfield town centre. We lived on a council estate there. My childhood really was just, I would say, for people who lived in that area at that time, was pretty normal. It wasn't really unusual. And I just had, I wouldn't say it was a fantastically happy upbringing, but I wouldn't say it was a traumatic upbringing either, to be honest. It was just average.
I think it's refreshing to hear you say that. And taking responsibility for your own actions, because I've mentioned this when I've been interviewed in podcasts, and I'll make the point that it doesn't sit well with me when people so easily blame their environment. I get it as well. Sometimes not everybody gets the same opportunities. I do get that.
Yeah.
But no, I always make the point of saying no. I accept my. I accept my action. I take responsibility for my actions. So it's nice to hear somebody else say that. And can I just say as well, I should have said this at the beginning, you're probably the youngest guest we've had on Frankly Speaking. So that's good to see some of the, apart from the fact you're making me and Gary feel a bit old, we're not not so keen on that, to be honest, but it's not. It's nice to have some young blood, for want of a better way of putting it.
Yeah, because
What
I'm
was your school life like? Then? How did you get on at school?
So basically, growing up in Crosslandmore, lived with my mum. She has 4 other children. Obviously, they've come along later. I'm my mum's oldest. And basically, school life, primary school, just very average, you know, going to school every day, nothing out of the ordinary, really. Until I would say year 6. So that's the last year of primary school. Things did kind of change a little bit for me. There's some quite significant parts that happened in year 6, but I would say as an overall of school, it wasn't really anything out of the ordinary, just a normal child just going to school every day, coming home, playing out, doing the usual things that kids do. And there was nothing extraordinary about it. It was just, it is what it is. But in year 6, there was a few developments that kind of set me up for how things have progressed, really, in the grand scheme of things. But other than that, there was nothing really unusual at primary school.
In your secondary school, did you have aspirations? Did you have an idea of what career you might have wanted to pursue?
So, as I said, the last year in primary school, I was caught at school with cannabis. So I would have been 11 years of age then. And I'll tell you what I was doing with the cannabis was I was basically stealing it off my mum's boyfriend at the time.
Right.
And I was selling it. Obviously, I didn't really understand the value of money and stuff then because I was only young. But I obviously understood that people obviously sell it. From being from a council estate, I understood that obviously this was worth money and people bought it. So I was selling cannabis at 11 years of age to older people. But for really, you might have had, if it was, say, for instance, worth £50, they were probably getting it for a tenner. So all the older boys loved me because they were getting all this grass for what really probably about a fraction of what it was actually worth. But I didn't really understand the value of stuff. So I was pulled in year 6 by the head teacher, Miss Blackerby at Crosslandmore Junior Schools, about that. And obviously my mum had to come to a meeting and stuff, and I said I wouldn't do it again, and I never did. And then I had a really good relationship the whole time growing up with my grandma and granddad. So they lived near my secondary school. So the secondary school I was going to, Rides Hall, they lived near that. So I moved in with my grandma and granddad, and I'd have been 11, 12 then when I moved in with them. Went to secondary school. I'd obviously had this little blip at the primary school with this cannabis, and obviously moved on from that and moved into the secondary school. No one from my school went to that secondary school, so I was very much alone at that school. Everyone had gone to another school in Huddersfield called Moor End from the school, but I'd obviously gone to another school to be close to my grandma and granddad. Moved in with my grandma and granddad. Everything was sound, happy life. Got spoiled by my grandma and granddad. And that's basically growing up was like that. There wasn't really, like I said, other than that cannabis in year 6, there wasn't really anything significant, really, that was different to any other child growing up, really, I wouldn't have thought. There was nothing like, there was no like abuse or anything like that. So, it was just literally just a normal upbringing.
Did you get the opportunity to speak to a careers officer? Did you discuss what you might want to do with anybody?
Not in the first year. So I remember a conversation I had. Now, in the first year of high school, this is where things started to go wrong for me a little bit. I'm not using it. I'm not blaming it. I'm not using it. When you're actually the first person I've ever spoken to about this, I haven't even spoken to my family about it. So I'm going to talk to you about it now. And this, like I say, is the first time I've ever spoke about this subject. And I think it had definitely, it contributed to my behaviour change. And my grandma and granddad split up and they went through a divorce in my first year of high school. And that was really difficult for me because they'd been close. And that was like the place I enjoyed going was my grandma and granddad. We'd do things on a weekend, like camping, stuff like that with my grandma and granddad. And then when they split up, that really, really hurt me, that, to be honest, because I never thought they would split up. And then my behaviour at school started to really deteriorate, really quite badly. I became quite involved in fights and disruptive behaviour, and I didn't really want to be at school. I'd made my mind up then, but halfway into the first year, that school wasn't for me. The school tried to manage my behaviour, but it ended up with me getting excluded. I just point blankly wouldn't listen to anything that they were saying. So they tried to put me in isolation and things like that. And then I knew if you misbehaved when you got to isolation that you'd be eventually excluded. So I would do that on purpose to get excluded from school because I didn't want to be there. And the times I was at school, I was violent and I was having fights with people and altercations. And it was just a deterioration completely of what my behaviour had been like beforehand. And then school obviously tried to impose different schools. I went to, it's called a pupil referral unit. I went there for 6 weeks on a trial. That was successful, so I was allowed to go back to school. Then my behaviour deteriorated again. I was then sent on a managed transfer for a month to another school. That lasted 2 days. They said they couldn't handle me at the new school, so I was sent back to the school. And eventually I was permanently excluded in, I think, the 3rd year of school, despite everything that the school had tried to do. And I was then sent to a full-time pupil referral unit in the 3rd year of school. I was then moved from pupil referral unit to pupil referral unit because my behaviour was bad. And I had this dream that I was going to be an architect. That's what, even despite all the behaviour, I wanted to be an architect. And so then when I went to the last pupil referral unit, they asked me what I wanted to be, which was in the last year of my schooling. And I told them I wanted to be an architect. They then started putting me on to people who were in the architectural business and got me an interview with an architectural firm in Huddersfield. And we did more or less like a mock exam with this architect. And then what happened was my behaviour again deteriorated. And as a consequence of my behaviour, the architectural placement that I had lined up was taken away from me. Which in turn really then made my behaviour even worse. And that's around the time, I'd say in the 3rd year of high school is around the time that I was obviously becoming involved in the football scene and going to football with friends from school. But to be honest with you, Frank, I'll be brutally honest with you, I'm not going to stand here and pretend I'm a football fan and I was really interested in football. The truth of the matter is, in that 3rd year of school, the reason I was going to football matches really is, you obviously know yourself, there's an element of, obviously, you've got your football fans and then you've got an element of people who are there for other reasons. And I was more interested in the people who was there for other reasons than I was anything to do with football. I couldn't have told you the 11 players who were playing at any one time, to be quite honest with you.
That's very honest of you, to be honest.
No, that is the truth. I just had no end.
Me and Gary are Tottenham fans. We know the name of all of our players, and we wish we didn't know some of them. Don't worry.
So that was in the 3rd year, and I was obviously going to football and then doing a few away days, local ones, and getting involved in that. And then obviously things progressed, don't they? As you know, I always loved the clothes. I know it sounds really naive of me, but I really liked the way these guys dressed. It was not actually anything to do with being violent or anything like that. I just liked the clothes. And then, yourself, you get involved, you see a little bit more. And I thought, I'd fancy a bit of that. Little team of us got together, little firm. We went to all the local away games. We started dressing the part, little Stone Island CP jackets. And from that, we just became entrenched and embroiled in this thing. And all the old lot found it highly hilarious because we were so little. They started calling us the under twos.
Right.
So that's basically the school is basically, I didn't really want to be at school. the third year I got involved in football, I went to these pupil referral units, and that's basically the sequence of events of how school went and how my life was changing for the worst, really.
Did you ever get nicked at the football?
So I went to obviously a few matches, and you know, you see things, and then you start getting a little bit closer to it. And I was always fascinated by it, and I always wanted to be involved. But I think the lads who I was with, they weren't really, to be honest with you, probably didn't want to be there. As much of a good idea it sounded, and as great as it looked, I don't think they had the same intentions. I really wanted to be involved in it. And age 14, I was involved in one of the biggest cases that Huddersfield's ever seen, which was with Millwall, and it was dubbed by the media called the Battle of Waterloo. And there was like 60 people fighting in the streets, and I was involved in that. That was my first ever offence. And I just think I got a buzz from it, and it just kind of stemmed from that. And then it seemed like an everyday occurrence. My whole life seemed to be surrounded, and everything that I did in my life was all to do with this football violence, really, to be honest with you. I became quite obsessive about it.
When you say the Battle of Waterloo,
Yeah.
I'm taking it for granted this is Waterloo Station in London, is it?
No, a Waterloo pub in Huddersfield.
I see.
Yeah.
I thought you'd come down to Millwall, and something had happened around Waterloo Station, but I see. Yeah.
Yeah, this was at home. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was quite serious disorder, really. That hit all the newspapers, and obviously, with me being so young, I became the focus of that investigation, because I think the youngest there was about 30, and the Millwall lot, I think the youngest on their side was about 42. So I was 14, caught up in this massive. I don't even know how you describe it, but the media obviously described it as the Battle of Waterloo. And then you've got me, I'm only 5'6" now, so I must have been about 5 foot, involved in all this disorder. And obviously I got nicked. The media was all over it, and I got 6-year banning order for it. 6-year banning order for that one.
See, we were lucky in my day. It was mainly, sometimes you got a slap round the head, at the cup, or you got a kick up the arse. And if you did get nicked, I can remember a £25 fine.
Yeah.
I can remember a mate got nicked on the same day. He got a £50 fine only because he'd had a previous. But you could pretty much. The most I ever paid for a fine was, I think it was about £200, and then it did start to sink in there. Hold on.
Yeah.
And then of course when you start getting suspended sentences, things like that.
Yeah.
You do tend to think, hold on, times they've changed.
Yeah, definitely.
And of course we clearly know now that there's the custodial sentences that were then introduced.
Because that's what I realised with that case. I mean, I'll give you a brief breakdown of what happened that day. So I was called by one of the older lads. He gave me a ring, and he basically said, look, I think Millwall are going to be coming to the Waterloo pub, or they're certainly going to be driving past it, because where the Waterloo pub is situated, that comes off from the motorway off the M1. So they would have to have gone through that way.
Yeah.
And I think it was either 3 or 4 minibuses of Millwall's top boys were all driving through, and I seen that. And I said, oh, look, it says City of London Transport on the side of the minibus. So we knew they were coming, or we knew certainly that there was some Millwall supporters there. We didn't at the time realise, well, I certainly didn't. It came out in the court case later that someone had been on the phone making contact with them. So someone there must have known that they were near. And it was like something out of a film, to be quite honest with you, Frank. They just basically pulled up outside the pub. It was pelted with bricks, but there was like, for me as a young lad watching this, when a firm's obviously quite experienced, because even though he was throwing all these things, bricks, bottles, anything, they just literally just seemed to just get off these minibuses so calm. I've never seen anything like it. They got in a little team together and just walked towards the pub, and just, it didn't seem like anything bothered them. So all these bottles and bricks just didn't seem to be doing anything. They was undeterred, and they were just like so fixated on doing so much damage towards us that they were just there. And I'm thinking, fucking hell, this is getting a bit fucking naughty. This now, they don't seem to be budging. I've never seen that before, because the scuffles and scrapes I'd seen, you know how it is at football sometimes. There's little bits of scuffles here and there and everywhere, but this was just like a group of Terminators just walking towards you. So obviously hell breaks loose. Some of our top lads at the older end, were knocked out unconscious, and I thought, bloody hell, this is getting quite scary now. People with blood and all that, and I was just in the middle of that, so I just picked up the glasses that I could find, and I just started throwing them at them and hoping that somehow they'd get in, try retreat, or we'd have a bit of breathing space. But it just seemed to go on and on and on. Then the police arrived, and it was still going on while the police were there. They were undeterred by these police that had turned up. I think one of them police officers, first on the scene, actually got some kind of medal for bravery because of it. It was quite serious stuff, to be honest. And we ended up getting in a van with a friend of mine who got stabbed in the face from one of the Millwall, and we drove off to another pub. Obviously, we didn't know at the time, but we know now that we was followed by police, and we were photographed with our clothing, etc., which they then matched to obviously the CCTV, and how we was all convicted.
How long would you say you stayed part of that scene? That kind of we'll call it what it is. That kind of hooligan scene, football.
So I would say that was in 2009, 2010. I would say that I probably, because I got the banning order, the 6-year banning order, that prevented me from entering the town centre on match days with, I think, a 3-mile radius. So I couldn't go in the town centre on match day. So I just kind of progressively drifted out of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But they were still all my friends. I'd go to parties with them lads on a weekend, and, I would always be around the scene. But as far as the football scene were concerned then, after that incident, and obviously I've been involved in scrapes afterwards, but it kind of just, I was always there, but not there, if that makes sense. So I'd make it maybe afterwards, after the banning order had finished, which I think was 2 hours after the game. I used to go into town and meet my friends, and then sometimes it'd be like supporters or, little firms knocking around, still having a drink, and it was still going off. But that was probably the most serious disorder I've been involved in as far as football is related.
Yeah. Did you knock around with older people?
Yeah. Always. Yeah. And I think that is a massive, massive point of my story, is you've got a 14, 15, 16-year-old lad who's listening to all these stories of older lads who was involved in all this football violence. And some of them obviously was involved in moving on from the football stuff into the 90s, like the rave scene, drugs, all these things. So that has had a massive impact in my brain, which was 14, 15, 16-year-old, which was like a sponge. And I've taken maybe some of these stories that these old lads were telling us were maybe a bit of fiction. But when you're that age, you kind of take what these lads are saying as gospel. So I started to live in a certain way, and I was listening to these older people and really believing that this was how it was meant to be. And when I look back now, I think a lot of them stories, probably what we were getting filtered at that age, were nothing more than fantasy, to be honest. But that actually, as being a young lad, that really went into my brain. And at such a young age, you know yourself, Frank, if things go into your brain at a young age, you take them on into your adult life. And I think that was definitely a massive point, that violence was a normalised thing. I was doing it most weekends at football. And progressively, I just think there's been a shift and move on to other things because of obviously influences. But I'm not going to solely blame them people, because I do think that I was destined to do that before their influence ever came into it. I had this idea of what I wanted to do in my head. It just so happened that they kind of give me the tools and almost the door opening to be able to do what I already wanted to do anyway, if that makes sense.
Yeah, when I was a teenager, I worked with, blimey, 3 or 4 brothers at one stage.
Yeah,
Well, I was basically the youngest person that was working on this, construction building sort of company.
yeah,
And so, of course, you went drinking. You went drinking
yeah,
with them. You socialised with them, and you heard things, and and you witnessed things.
yeah,
Um, and you have to grow up very quickly, don't you?
yeah,
You can't
100%.
be a kid around. You got to grow up, and you got to prove your worth, so to speak.
Yeah,
And again, it's refreshing to hear you say that. I'm not blaming them for that, because you're right in what you say. It just gave me the opportunity
yeah,
to to be the way I clearly was meant to be. You
yeah.
know.
I do believe, yeah, that I was, even though my upbringing and my grandparents tried so hard with me, there's always been something in my head, the back
Mm,
of my head, that's just felt a bit different. If that makes sense, that I just didn't want to be like other kids, and I just seemed to always want to grow up so fast and wanted to
yeah.
do all these things and have a pint and all the rest.
I've got to ask you this, because I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit here, but it's while I remember this, because
Yeah,
you did land up in prison,
yeah.
right? Did you think before you went to prison that one day you would land up in prison?
I've got quite a funny story for this, and well, I say it's funny. It's actually quite tragic, to be honest. So when I was at school and I was misbehaving, they used to put you in this room. It was called RFI, Room for Improvement. And basically, what it was there were 2 walls. It was like a confined space with a chair, a table, and your work that you was given. But you had these 2 walls at the side of you. So it was just basically you looking at a wall in this isolation block thing. And I used to sit there and I used to think to myself, and this is the truth, I used to sit there and I used to think, this will never bother me because I will end up in prison one day. So this is just me training my mind how to deal with isolation. So yeah, in one side of it, I did believe I would be going to prison, but I will come to when I actually went to
Yeah,
prison.
of course, yeah.
That
I was
the
just
room for
intrigued.
improvement.
I was intrigued because I can remember younger, and I don't think I was doing anything that naughty, for want of a better way of putting it. Yeah, I was going to football, and yeah, clearly, if you got nicked enough times, you could land up in prison. But if I was watching a film, you know,
Yeah,
and if at prison, I
yeah,
used to get this really strange feeling
yeah,
that I think I used to imagine, how would I cope? I wonder
yeah.
what I would do in that situation.
Because
But not really having any reason to, but not
yeah,
that stage of my life,
same with me.
having
I mean,
reason.
when I was in that room for improvement, I had never been arrested.
Mm,
So I had no reason to believe, really, that I'd end up in prison. But I think there was almost a thing of wanting to go to prison.
mm,
So obviously the Battle of Waterloo happened. I was obviously arrested and I was sent to court. And what they did really is they played a bad trick, really. And this is probably one of the only things I regret, to be honest. I was obviously sent to court, Crown Court to start off with all the older defendants, my co-defendants, and then because I was so young, I was sent back to the youth court. So they was all in prison, sent to prison. But because me and another lad, we was young, we were sent to the youth court. I got a 6-year football banning order imposed on me. As I touched on earlier, the media jumped all over it, and the judge gave a thing called a parenting order. So obviously, at the time, my granddad was looking after me, even though my grandma and granddad split. I stayed with my granddad, and he was given a parenting order. Now, there's no reason why he should have been given that, but I felt so guilty, Frank, that my actions had basically brought my granddad to the detention of and they basically said they needed to put this parenting order, and he had to go to meetings and stuff, and they was basically sat him down and said, "This is how you should do it." But the truth is, it was nothing to do with him why I was doing the things I was doing. I was doing them things because I wanted to do them things, but I didn't really realise the knock-on effect it was having on on the wider people in my family.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it's
that is-
strange, isn't it? Because saying some respects, what the situation you brought him to,
yeah,
you felt worse about than what you did the punishment.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I understand that. I
Yeah.
definitely can identify with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I felt really bad about that. And then basically, because I think there was quite obviously there was a police football spotter called David Micklethwaite. He's like the main spotter police officer. So he deals with all football related incidents. He wrote a statement, which was read out in court, that even though this was my first offence, I'd been on the scene for 2 or 3 years prior to that.
Right.
And he said I was part of a risk group in Huddersfield supporters, and he basically painted quite a negative picture of me. And the other lad who was on the case with me, he got a 3-year ban. I got a 6-year international ban. And the magistrate basically told me, when he sentenced me, he basically said to me, from what I've read, if you stand before me again, you see that door there, you will be going straight to HMP YOY Wetherby. And I just thought, yeah, like, fuck, I will. And I basically had such a cocky attitude that I just walked out of that court that day. I didn't really care what he said to me, the magistrate, sorry. And I just carried on as normal. And obviously then this is where something really serious happened in my life, which changed the dynamics of how everything would be in my life, to be honest. And that was, I had a girlfriend at the time, and she invited us to a party, me and 3 of my friends, a party which was about a 45-minute walk normally from my house. But on this night in question, when she'd invited us to this party, she had a really big house in a really nice area in Huddersfield. It had been snowing, so all the roads were icy. There were no taxis or anything. So me and my 3 mates obviously had a few drinks at my house first. I will have been 15 then, so it's just after the Battle of Waterloo. And we got invited to this party. We go there with a few drinks. When we get to the house, it's taken about nearly 2 hours to get there because of the snow and the conditions. We get there, the house is in complete darkness. So we walk down the thing, I'm messaging her, but obviously technology wasn't that much of a big thing back then. So I was obviously trying to message you on a BlackBerry phone that I had. And we went down and they had a pool table in the garden. So we decided, because we travelled all that way, we had a few beers, we took the top off the pool table, and me and my friends, we started playing pool. Next thing, lights came on. We seen 3 figures walking towards us, which turned out to be 2 brothers and her dad, walking down with the dogs. Right, lads, what's going on here? I said, we've come to my girlfriend. I'm not going to name her, but we came to my girlfriend's at the time. She's invited us. I understand, blah, blah, blah. But we've walked for 2 hours in the snow. What's going on here? He said, no, that's it. There's no party here, as you can see. I don't know why she said that. I don't think she said that. And I did get aggressive. I had a few to drink. And I said to him, well, hang on a minute, mate. There's the fucking messages. Your daughter did say that. So what are you on about? So then as my attitude changed, his attitude changed. And obviously he's got the sons and the dogs are barking. And it kind of simmered itself out. And we agreed we'd finish the game of pool. When we put the balls where, put the pool cues where, we helped him put the top on, and we was walking away. Now I can't really remember what happened from being almost not making up, but both parties being pissed off. He was pissed off that we were there. We were pissed off that we walked this party that obviously turned out there wasn't a party. So we put the top on, helped him. We go to walk off. His sons have walked off a bit further in front of us, and then the dynamics of everything changed, Frank, really quite quickly. I didn't really understand it, and I was knocked unconscious by the dad. So I was 15. I was laid out in the middle of the snow. I'd hit my head on the wall, and I was completely unconscious. So what's happened then is I've come around from being unconscious, and I've seen my 3 friends attacking the dad. The sons was running off somewhere. I don't know what had happened to them, if they'd been attacked in the time I'd been unconscious. I don't really know how long I was unconscious for. But I do know when I woke up, they was all fighting with the dad and my friends. I was aggrieved. I'm not particularly proud of this. I was aggrieved that I'd been unconscious. My friends was clearly aggrieved with what had happened, and I proceeded to stamp on the victim of this because of what he'd done to me. A Range Rover that he owned was smashed up. I think windows were put through on the property by me and my friends, and then we could hear sirens coming, so we run off. Obviously, it was inevitable that we was obviously going to be arrested for that. The person, occupants of the house and the daughter and etc. knew it was us who had done that. And basically, the police are looking for us for 3 weeks. They keep missing me at my house. I was at my friend's house, one of the lads who got nicked on the case, in his spare bedroom. The police came and arrested him, but they've missed me. So I then got in contact with my other friend who they wanted. We went and met up in town. My friends had been nicked for a good 10 hours. We decided that the best thing to do was to go and hand ourselves in at the police station because we knew the game was up. When we got to the police station, I was transported from Huddersfield Police Station to Dewsbury Police Station, which is on the outskirts of Huddersfield. I was taken in there and I was told I was being arrested for ABH, actual bodily harm, which that's the lower end of the charge, but I don't think we quite made it on the GBH charge. But when I sat down in the interview, obviously this is the second time that I've been in a cell, so I was pretty used to it. I just didn't realise how serious this incident was. It was basically, the incident was said, it was in the hours of darkness, the house was in darkness, and we turned up unannounced, we wasn't invited, and we basically attacked this man and permanently broke his back. So when they read out the victim impact statement, I still didn't really understand, because I was so young, how serious this was. That his spine had been damaged in 4 places, his back was broken, and there was a strong possibility that he would never work again. So that had happened, and we was on bail for a while. We was finally charged with ABH. I got 7 counts of witness intimidation and perverting the course of justice added to my case, because I had gone down to where his sons worked in a shopping centre in Huddersfield and tried to intimidate the witnesses, which was obviously his son, and said, look, you can't be getting us going to court, you need to drop the charges, or this is going to happen, that's going to happen. Basically doing all this on camera, being totally unaware of how the system really works. I was just a kid and was taken through the court system. The magistrate said it was so serious they needed to take it to Crown Court. So this is now the second time that I'm in the Crown Court. And we went to trial. And I was advised by my solicitor that if I went guilty on the day of trial, that I would get a suspended sentence. If I proceeded not to go, if I went not guilty and took it to trial, there was a possibility I'd get the full sentence of 2 years. I think that's what the full sentence was at the time. That's certainly what they were talking about. And I thought, I'll plead guilty. I hold my hands up. I've done this. I'm going to go in the court, plead guilty, and I'm going to get a suspended sentence. That's what I honestly thought. What actually happened is it was adjourned for about another 3 weeks for pre-sentence reports. I obviously told them about, and they realised at school, and I had previous convictions for the Battle of Waterloo. I had a drunken disorderly on there as well. They put all that into the pre-sentence report, and I was subsequently jailed. Now, I obviously, and I've touched on my offences, but I understand that I've touched on that offence that I've just spoken about. But what I really want to talk about, and what is so important now for me, is from standing in that courtroom and going in there that morning. It was the 11th of November 2011, and I was only 16 by 1 month, so I'd just turned 16. And to be in that environment as a child, my mum and my granddad was in the, and my girlfriend at the time was in the, obviously the public gallery part, and I was stood there. I was totally really oblivious to what was going to happen to me. And this judge, he obviously said, right, Mr. McLaren, you've got the most offences, so you're the bench of sentencing. But I didn't know what that meant. I know what it means now. It means you're going to be getting the highest sentence.
Yeah.
So I stood up first, And he basically said to me, took his glasses off, and he said to me, this crime is a complete disgrace. The way you've acted and what you've done is a disgrace. Your behaviour after the crime is a disgrace. You have shown no remorse throughout this whole case. He says, you have bragged about it on Facebook because someone wrote a status about it and we was on the comments in 2011 bragging about what we had done. We didn't really understand at that time how serious this was. It was only when we got arrested we realised. And he said, and you are a disgrace. And he said, I sentenced you to 10 months in prison. And I just burst out crying. That's the truth. I sat in that dock and I cried my eyes out, and I looked over to my mum, who was also crying. And the next thing, the officers just come, they put the handcuffs on me, and I'm walking now into Bradford Crown Court cells. So I go under the doors, and still at this point, didn't really realise my friend has also been jailed, but he was 18 at the time. So I thought the judge had said 12 months. So when I get downstairs, I'm a nervous wreck. I was crying my eyes out, and I sat in this room. My barrister came down and spoke to me, and she said, I said, oh, I've got 12 months. How am I going to manage this? Fucking hell, I'm going to commit suicide. That's what I'm going to do. And this will be all your fault. She said, Mr. McLaren, you've only received 10 months and you'll be eligible for release after 5. I said, all right, thank you. So I kind of come round a little bit because I thought my mate would be coming to the same prison as me. So I thought, let's look at the positives. I'm in this cell. I'm not getting out of it. But my friend, he's also been sentenced to the same sentence as me. At least we'll go to the same prison in separate cells. It got to about 6 o'clock at night. I heard his door, because his door was in front of me and he could see through the crack. They went, come on then. What was his name? I'm not going to name him because I don't know where he's at in his life. So I'm not going to name anyone because I don't know if they were happy for me talking. I don't really associate with any of these people anymore. So I don't know where we're at. But I seen it and I said, come on, Mr. So-and-so. And he was taken out of his cell. He said, you're going to Doncaster prison. So I thought, right, they'll be coming for me in 5 minutes and I'll be going to Doncaster. That must be where we're going. They came to me and they went, right, Mr. McLaren, stand up. You're going to HMP YOY Weatherby. This is where it was G4S. I got in the van, thought, fucking hell, this is actually real. This is not like a bad dream. And I was double cuffed, put in the van, and I'd taken to Weatherby. But because I was so exhausted, Frank, from it all, I went to sleep. And I remember that the old G4S wagons, they had a radio in them, like a crackly old radio.
Yeah.
And I was talking to the guy in the van and I was saying, what's going to happen now? And he went, oh, you're going to go to the young offenders. It's not that bad. You get PlayStations, the usual shit that you hear almost daily. He was just trying to have an easy ride to that prison. I didn't really realise what we're getting into. So I thought, oh, he's saying you're going to get a PlayStation. It's not going to be that bad. We'll see when we get there. So nodded off on the M1 up to Weatherby from Bradford Crown Court. And I remember waking up because the van must have stopped. And we was at the gates of the prison and I thought, whoa, this ain't quite how I've read about prison before. This ain't quite how I anticipated it would look. There was massive fence around it. There's cameras everywhere. This big gate. And the vehicle drove in. They get these things like they have in Northern Ireland to look under the van. All the prison officers were wearing uniforms. They were polo shirts with a thing. They said that softened the image later on, not the black ties and white shirts. In the YOs, they wear like a blue polo shirt. Seeing all these guys doing this thing, they come in the van, they were counting how many people were there. I was thinking, fucking hell, I'm actually in prison. The van drives through to the reception area, greeted by some lovely officers who said, right, there's your dinner, sitting there. And I'm thinking, dinner? Fuck, I don't want any of that. And then meals they give you at reception, you won't be fit for a dog, you know what I mean? And then I'm sat there and the guy goes, oh, that's a nice jacket. I had this Bell stuff on. So I'm kind of trying to get into a conversation, take my mind off it with him about my Bell staff jacket, talking all kinds of shite about this jacket. And then what I could only describe to you, Frank, as a guy who looked the spitting image of Where's Wally came in. He had these little like circular glasses on, really unusual looking man. And he went, right, come on then for a strip search. And I thought, I said, no. There ain't going to be no strip search here, pal. Especially not with you. I says, I'm all right. Go and deal with the other lads. And I honestly thought, because we were kids, that you could kind of just say, I'm not having it, and that would be it. And he went, listen, McLaren, you've got two options here. You can either walk into the strip search, or we're just going to forcefully strip search you. So I thought, right, this guy's obviously serious. So I went into this little room, strip search, which I found really degrading. Obviously, you pull your bottom half down, you pull your top half up. And then he gave me these prison clothes, which was grey tracksuit bottoms and prison shoes, and this orange top, which was the induction one, because everything was colour coordinated in that prison. So it was an orange top, which looked like some out of a experiment in American prison. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I got my little bag with a few. You got like a first night pack with a bar of chocolate in that, a letter, the usuals. And I walked up to the wing, and I thought, it looks like prison. It did. Right there's your cell, just a normal cell, a bed, a sink, a toilet. It stunk. The place absolutely stunk. And I was sat in there that night, and because I was so exhausted, I went to sleep. That was my first night in prison. I didn't cry. I didn't think about it. I just went to sleep. It's when I woke up the next day, because I was sentenced on a Friday. So obviously the weekend lockdown, obviously restricted regime on a Saturday and Sunday. I was obviously brought out myself, but we spent a lot of time in our cells throughout the weekend. So I thought, oh my God, is this what's in store for me? So I got out for my breakfast. All the seats were numbered. I didn't know my cell number. I sat in someone else's seat. Guy comes over to me, get the fuck out of the seat. And I just thought, what shall I do? And like all the old lads said, anyone says anything to you in prison, you just set about them on sight. But I was so exhausted, Frank, and so broken by the whole experience. And I'd never done this, and I've never done anything similar to it in my life. I just moved. I couldn't be asked. I thought, I don't know this guy. We're in prison. He could be in here for fucking killing someone or anything. I don't know. Yeah. And I just moved, and everyone laughed, and it was a big joke. And I thought, nah, this can't continue. So I had my breakfast, went back to my cell, I cried my eyes out, and I just put my buzzer on, and I said, I'm going to tell you now, I'm going to commit suicide. So you need to let me out of this prison, because otherwise you're going to have a 16-year-old has committed suicide at your hand. So it's probably better for everyone that you just open the gate and let me out. And I remember it, and it's so sad to think about it, because I actually genuinely thought that if I pressed that buzzer and said to them that I was going to commit suicide, that they would just let me out of the prison. Oh, sorry, I hadn't spoken about it before, so it's quite difficult. But I just thought to myself that they would obviously have to take that seriously and would actually just let me go home. And that's what I was saying to them. I was saying, like, just let me go home. I've got a family. I'm never going to do this again. I've learned from my mistakes, and I'm really, really sorry. I just need to go home, and I am going to commit suicide. And they said, Reece, they said, unfortunately, you're in prison, and it's our duty to make sure you finish your sentence, and we will put everything in place now to make sure that you don't commit suicide. Yeah. And they put me on an ACT document. I was only on that for a week, and I just had to come to terms with it, Frank. Do you know something? That prison was actually really good, to be honest. They supported me a lot through that time, and like the chaplain and stuff came to see me. And I ended up doing 4 months. I was released a month early on tag. And, you know, I have obviously a lot of stories from prison, like fights and stuff like that. I'm not going to go into all that. But overall, that experience in there, I'd say the first month was terrible. I thought about hanging myself. I was going to cut my wrist. But in the Young Offenders Institute, there isn't really anything that you can do anything with, because obviously you have to keep it really safe environments, like razor blades and stuff are handed in with your ID card and all that, and you can only have them at a certain time. So there wasn't really, and I didn't want to commit suicide. I didn't want to kill myself. I was just using that as a bargaining tool to obviously try and get to think they would actually think, right, we can't have a kid who's going to commit suicide, so we're going to have to send him home. I honestly did think that, and that's the saddest part of it, really. And I think that made me change as a person a little bit, because I witnessed a lot of violence in there.
While you were there, did you experience anybody else actually committing suicide?
Yeah, there was one in particular. So as you know, Frank, there's obviously a lot of shouting and etc. out of windows and stuff. And this one night in particular, they'd been shouting at this lad, all kinds of stuff, saying they were going to rape him and kill him, blah, blah, blah. And it obviously had an adverse effect on him. And he killed himself. Obviously, when we get released in the morning for our breakfast, it was under restricted lock. So it was officer taking us and back in the cell. And we was eventually moved because that cell that he was in became a crime scene. Obviously, they'd obviously moved the body and that in the night, but he'd committed suicide. And that had a really adverse effect on me mentally, because I'd never been experienced or seen or heard anything like that in my life before. So to see all that and hear about it the next day, and to hear how bad some of these children were. We were 15 to 18, Frank, and they was laughing out the windows, and I was sat there thinking, this isn't a bit of me, this. I'm not evil like these lot, you know what I mean? I'm thinking, they found it highly amusing that he killed himself, and I was sat there thinking, fuck, I need out of this fucking place, quick.
I experienced it, and no, you're right. It's just not very nice. And there was I won't go. It's quite a long story, so I won't go into it. This is your platform today, not mine. But I'd got quite close to a fella at one time. Had been, I think he was, if he wasn't Britain's most wanted, he was certainly England's most wanted. And he basically got told that he had hepatitis, and he got it in his head he wouldn't be able to kiss his wife and children and so on. And I was a listener at the time, and I used to go and listen to him, and we used to socialise as well. We became quite good friends. And on a particular occasion, they took him down the block, and he came back, and then he started screaming, Frank, they're trying to kill me, help me. And of course, you're behind the door. And I'm banging the door, as what the fuck's going on, and of course the screw comes, says, calm down, we've got it under control. We're going to take him back down to the, to the block, or the medical department. Yeah. Unbeknown to me, during the dinner time, they brought him back up. Yeah. He'd gone back in the cell, and when they opened him up for the afternoon, opened us all up for the afternoon, they opened him. Normally they would open me up, I'd come out, and then they'd open him. Yeah. On this occasion, they opened him, and they found him hanging. So of course, that night when I went to bed, all I had in my head was, Frank, help me. And it really got me. It really got to me. And they offered me counselling. They actually said, would you like to speak to a counsellor? I said, that'd be like a bloke. I went, no, I'm all right. No, don't worry about that. But looking back on it, I probably should have. Should have. And I would advise anybody now,
100%.
Talk to someone, talk it through with somebody, because it did haunt me for days. And funny enough, they had an inquiry, and I became part of the inquiry. And I remember getting a letter from his family saying, thanks for the support that you'd given him while he was still alive. So not a nice experience at all. That not a nice. No, experience.
And you carry it. Yeah. And I mean, you don't just leave prison and all that goes away. I mean, there was like, in prison, obviously that's one of the stories when the first time I was ever jailed. And obviously there was another lad, because obviously there's no categorisation system in Young Offenders Institute. So all YOYs are deemed to be high risk units anyway, because they can't, I think a YOY only has a fence around it, doesn't have a wall around it. So they're all the same no matter where they go. So you get people who would normally be deemed, if their offences were as an adult, they would be deemed category A, some of them AAA. But because they're young offenders, there's no categorisation system. No, so you've got a lad who's done a bit of football violence with a guy like Joshua Davis, for instance. He was one of the lads who was on my wing. He had killed his girlfriend, over a bet for a breakfast. So if you have time, have a look at this case. Joshua Davis. It was in North Wales, and basically his friend said to me, to him, I bet you wouldn't kill your girlfriend. And he put, what you betting? And he said, I bet you a breakfast, that you, like in a cafe, a breakfast. And he basically lured his girlfriend into some woods, and he hit her over the head with a brick repeatedly till she was dead. And then he messaged his friend and said, done the job, lads. I'll have mushrooms and hash browns. So you think about it, Frank. That's just one of the people who was in there amongst us, yeah? Joshua Davis, an absolute psychopath who killed his girlfriend for no other reason than a breakfast bet. That's what it was. And you think at a 16-year-old going into that environment, people, you know, hanging themselves, people biting themselves because they haven't got razor blades, you know, doing self-harm, people fighting, people bullying, all these things. I mean, I kept out of the way a lot, so I think I didn't receive any of that bullying or anything. I hands down say I was never a victim of bullying in the whole time of being in prison. I tried to get along with everyone. I tried to understand people, even though they were from totally different beginnings to me. I tried to find some mutual ground with them and to be friendly with people because I understand I had to live there. So I needed to make as many friends as I could because I needed to get through that 4 months. But when you put people like Joshua Davis into the mix, should they really be around someone like, you know, a normal offender? Probably not, because
no.
And there was a lot of lads in that prison who had done bits of work. You know, there was gang members from Tottenham who had done killings and stuff. And you know, I'm not going to name them all but there's some quite high profile people who was in there, and I was exposed to that at such a young age that as I came back to this conversation I had with you earlier about the brain being a sponge, them older lads telling me these things, but now we're having to listen to people's stories who've killed their girlfriend over a breakfast, and that's going in as well. And it had a really adverse effect on my mental health. It did.
Reece, I'm keen to talk about your social activism. Clearly, you know, the Reece, you know, we know now, but clearly there's a period before that.
There is.
You clearly, without minimising the other things, it became far more serious, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, and that's when I get to the.
Can we focus on that because I only know some of your story, in all fairness, and you've been and on social media you've been very open, very open, and basically said that you know that you'll use this opportunity today. To explain it from your point of view, from your side of the fence, so to speak.
Because that's that. I've just got one last offence.
And
that I mean, I've been convicted 27 times, Frank. Yeah, over 77 offences. But I'm not going to go and break them all down because some of them are that important. I've tried to keep it cut to what I want to speak about. And I came out of prison age 16 after serving 4 months. I was released a month early on tag. And I went back at it, Frank. I'd forgotten about all the things that I'd done. You know yourself, when you get out, you kind of lose it all. And I just thought, I've done the worst thing they can do to me now. I'm out of here. Everyone was like, oh my God, Reece has been to prison. The little girls and all that, when I was, you know, all the other lasses in the area, they all loved it because I've been to prison. I was a bad boy, so I got loads of birds, all the young birds after me, immature. And what ends up happening, Frank, age 16, I'm released. And I go on, I get caught up in another football violence, which I was acquitted of. There wasn't enough evidence to obviously convict me. And I ended up involved in a situation where my friend's house had been threatened to be burnt down by some Leeds supporters. Me and 2 other friends ended up going looking for this person, and we get caught up in a bit of disorder on the way there. Unbeknown to me, my friend actually had a 9mm pistol on him, and we go looking for these guys. But we find some other guys. We asked them in the area, do you know so and so? Their response was yes, to which I hit him. We chased them down the road, all big fiasco in the middle of the street. When I've turned round, my friend at the time has got a gun to a passerby's head who had tried to intervene, and said, shut the fuck up and get in your car, or I'm going to put one through your nut. That's what happened. I've then run to that. I've took the gun off him. I've turned it round and I've pistol whipped the victim. He's drove off. Stupidly again, he recognised me, and I was more or less apprehended within, I think it was about a week. I was coming out of my house. armed police swooped. Well, obviously, in that night in the area, I took the firearm myself. Police had obviously captured 2 of my friends, but the identification was wrong, so they was able to walk away. I had the gun, I was ducking and diving, and I got out of there through the back streets, and I had this gun on there. I threw it in a wall. I went back to the scene later that night, and I recovered it, and I took it with me, and I hid it. It's never been found to this day. A week or so later, I was arrested at my house by armed police. The whole area was swarmed with armed police, a helicopter and everything, because obviously firearms was included into this. And I was remanded. Obviously, because the firearm was never seized, there was no gunshot residue when I was swabbed at Huddersfield Police Station. There was no reason to believe that this firearms incident had taken place. There was no CCTV, other than the fact that the victim had said a firearm had been held to his head and he'd been hit with one. The GSR'd me, did all kinds of checks, searched my properties, etc. I was 17 at the time, and I was remanded. I was remanded on possession of a firearm with intent to endanger lives. But I don't know if you know much about firearms. Well, you do actually, Frank. I've read your book. So what happened is, because the firearm was never recovered, obviously I was transported to and from H&P Wetherby again to Leeds Crown Court, where I stood trial, and they gave me the opportunity to plead guilty to possession of an imitation firearm because the firearm had never been recovered. So I took that. I said, yeah, do what you've got to do. He said, we're going to adjourn it for 3 weeks. I said, don't bother adjourning it for 3 weeks. Just get on with whatever you've got to do. I don't want a pre-sentence report. My friend had gone Queen's evidence against me. I knew the game was up. I just thought the best thing to do here, he's wrote a statement, he's willing to go Queen's evidence on the day of trial. The best thing is plead guilty to this, what I've been given, this plea bargain by the Crown Prosecution Service. Plead guilty to possession of an imitation firearm, see what I get. It won't be the 3 years minimum on a youth with a possession of a firearm. So I got 2 years. Got 2 years for that. Back to prison. At no point, Frank, in this time in prison did I show any remorse about anything I'd done. I was completely switched off to my emotions entirely. The time before, where I cried and all the rest of it, I just took this in my stride. I was not bothered one single bit. I was then released from prison. I did 8 months of the 2 year sentence, and I was released on, obviously, tag again. And, you know, I did the tag, did the probation, got everything that I needed to do, and I just carried on with my life. I ended up getting into a relationship with a girl whose dad I knew. And, you know, I said to myself, this was 2013, I was released. I get in this new relationship 2014, and I say, right, that's it, I'm done. 2014, I'm with this girl. I was with her for 12 months, and I didn't commit crime in the whole time I was with her. I was really serious about this girl, and we went out one night. I'd just lost my job, and we went out in the town centre, and a bouncer felt her ass. So I caused £4,000 worth of damage to the bar in question, and I attacked the bouncers. This is where things started taking a turn for the worst. So obviously, go through the court system again. I was jailed for 4 months. My relationship completely deteriorated. I was in prison. Everyone's smoking this spice. This is 2015 now. 4 months, do 2 months. But this 2 months is the worst sentence I've ever done, Frank. Everyone were dropping like flies in there on this spice. Everyone's on it. I've never touched it. So I'm just in the cell, breathing it all in and taking it all in my stride, or at least trying. And my mental health was deteriorating really badly, became really paranoid. I was segregated because of the sentence was only a short period of time. My hair got really long. I had this beard. And I came out and I started thinking that spice and other substances were coming through taps. I thought everyone had tried to spike me. I was completely and utterly shattered as a person. And I'm still recovering from that sentence today. And I pledged that because that bouncer felt my girlfriend's ass, I blamed him for everything that had happened. My reaction, my relationship breaking down, everything I'd been exposed to. And I thought, fuck this. These bouncers are having it now. I've got nothing worth living for. So my girlfriend's gone. I really loved her. I'm going to attack these bouncers. So I linked up with a lad I'd met in prison, and we attacked 15 bouncers over a 12-month period, subsequently arrested and brought before the magistrates again for that, which the case was dropped. So that's kind of a brief insight into what I would say would be my youth offending and how things had gone. But this bouncer thing, the relationship breakdown, the 2 months in prison, in a adult prison, may I put it now, I was so angry, Frank, mentally ill when I came out. I just wanted to hide in my bed. I didn't really know what to say to people. I was trying to explain myself. Thought everyone was looking at me like I was a lunatic. So I took the focus off a really terrible situation where I should have got therapy or something. I've been jailed by the time I'm 19 3 times, yeah? So I'm totally away with the fairies at this point. And I thought, right, the only way to deal with this trauma is to be violent. And that's when I attacked them bouncers. And I don't have any regrets in doing that, because he sexually assaulted my girlfriend. He never stood charges for it. He never got in trouble for it. Yet I reacted to that problem and was subsequently imprisoned and was exposed to an adult system where everyone was on drugs and all these things were happening. And it completely made my head completely different to how it had been. And this is where I started going into more serious crime now. I'd had a taste of the adult prisons. I've had a taste of the youth offending prisons. And my head probably wasn't the best it could have been. And I carried on and I started doing things and meeting people and making money. And I went to buy a shotgun off someone who I thought was a friend. And I thought I was going to get involved in the drugs game. So I started planning that I needed a shotgun for protection and that I was going to go on and sell drugs, because no one would be interested in me, because I've got three prison sentences behind me. I'm only 19. I've lost everything. I'm not interested anymore. I've got nothing worth living for. So I thought, I'm going to get myself a shotgun, 500 quid. And I went to meet this guy who I thought was a bit of a player. Turns out, looking back now, he's actually like a drug addict, and he actually got the shotgun that I was going to buy. He turned it on me, put it to my head, and he said, "You're not getting no fucking shotgun, empty your pockets." I had £1,000 in my pockets, and I give it him. I told my dad about it. My dad retrieved the money. So I knew now that I was stepping up. I got this firearms offence. I've gone to buy this shotgun. I've been robbed, which was a learning curve. We're absolutely pissed off. I told my dad about it. I said, "Dad, I don't know, I'm going to put this to you." But my dad was he wasn't like a father like most people. Like, can't imagine most people going to their dad and saying, "Dad, I've been robbed for a shotgun," and then their dad not saying something like, "Oh my God, what the fuck were you doing with a shotgun?" My dad's response was, "I'll get you the money back, kid, don't worry about it." He wasn't particularly interested that I'd just been released for firearms offences, and I was now actively trying to seek another shotgun. So that was that. I got my money back, and I'd switched off, Frank, completely. And I started collecting debts for people, small debts. A lot of the lads on the football scene who I knew were doing drugs and stuff, and I was doing a little bits of work, nothing major. I'm not going to sit here and say I was making millions of pounds, because I wasn't. I was making a few hundred quid here and a few hundred quid there every couple of months, and just doing bits and bats, smashing a few windows or putting it on people a bit or whatever, blowing cars up, you know how it goes. And I was getting a few hundred quid for doing that. And I got involved in something. Again, I was so depressed over my relationship breaking down. I just couldn't handle it, Frank. And I got involved in football again. So I said to my mates, I'm back on the scene. I don't give a fuck about the banning order. I want to go watch England v Switzerland. So we arranged a get together. We was going with some other lads from up north. So we went to Rotherham that day. Obviously, the dynamics of Rotherham, as you probably already know it, Frank, with all the grooming scandal and everything that been going on there. I got caught up in something. That was completely not the reason why I was there, but I think I was collateral damage. The 7 of us who was arrested were definitely collateral damage for and being held responsible for everything that had gone on in Rotherham. There'd been a Britain First march that day to do with his grooming scandal. I was 3.5 miles away from that protest at any one time, and basically a group of opposing factions, shall we say, were being walked past the pub that we was in, which was 3.5 miles away from the town centre where this Britain First march had been held, and we was attacked with machetes, guns, all the rest of it. Police officer said he'd never been so frightened in all of his 25 years of experience. So my defence was, how do you think I felt then? And they created a campaign called the Rotherham 12. So there was 250 of them, 7 of us, but 12 of them was arrested. And their defence was that we were Britain First activists in the area to stir up racial tensions, and that's why they attacked us, even though the intelligence that day suggested we was nothing to do with it. They was all acquitted. Jeremy Corbyn and all that. Michael Mansfield QC represented them, and they was all acquitted. I was in Cuba at the time, and I kind of knew that because they'd been acquitted, when it was time for our trial, which was a 6-week trial, that we wasn't going to be listened to. We was going to be the collateral damage, and we were going to be held responsible for everything that had been happening in Rotherham. Their campaign had been very successful, obviously swayed the jury. They got even the prosecutor were basically saying that we were there to cause trouble. In turn, they were acquitted. We had our trial. I was given 3.5 years. So I was given 3.5 years for being attacked by 250 people with machetes. There were sightings of a shotgun. Police officer said in his 25 years of experience, he'd never been so frightened. So my defence was, if that police officer felt like that, how do you think I felt? 3.5 years I was given by Judge Bartfield at Sheffield Crown Court, and I was sent to prison. The night I got to prison, I was attacked in prison by Pakistani inmates, basically given an ultimatum. If I convert to Islam, I'll be able to walk out, and that'll be it. If I go to Friday prayers, obviously I'm not a religious person, so I wasn't going to be doing that. So every day I walked out, I was getting attacked. So eventually they moved me prison to Armley Prison, which is in Leeds. Yeah, I went to the high security bit there, and I was in a high security cell, and they said I shouldn't have actually been sent there. I was the wrong categorisation of going to that prison. So I was banned from that prison. I was now banned from the prison I'd just come to because of all the disorder that had happened there. I was told I would never enter Armley Prison again for something that my brother had done in there about 15 years previously, because my brother's serving a 25-year minimum Home Office recommendation from joint enterprise murder, Frank. So I lasted a couple of days in that prison, and I was ousted out of the prison, and I was sent to a prison in Doncaster called Moorlands. This is where everything now changed. I was in that Doncaster Moorlands, and I was reading the Financial Times. I had this aspiration that when I came out of prison, I was going to open up a business. I already had a business that had already been going on before I went to prison. I had subsequently lost that business as a result of being imprisoned. And I was reading the Financial Times, and I just thought, I'll get some inside knowledge, some business knowledge for setting me up when I get released. And there was this elderly gentleman in his 70s who was also getting the Financial Times. So as you can imagine, Frank, given the circumstances in prison, there wasn't many people reading the Financial Times. No. So this sparked a conversation with this elderly gentleman. It turned out he was doing 2 years for basically a signature on a piece of paper for a property deal, a multi-million-pound property deal that had gone wrong. He was a banker of 40 years. So he also read the Financial Times, and he said, "Oh, come to my cell and we'll talk about the Financial Times." He told me a little bit about him, himself, and he said he was a banker. He'd been caught up in this signature default, which was going down as fraud, something to do with his property, to do with the shopping centre and all the things that they had planned going on with it. And he said he had a property in Spain. He didn't mention anything about crime or anything. He just basically portrayed it to me that he was an elderly gentleman who'd been caught up by the signature default, had a property in Spain, and he was a disgraced banker. He'd been struck off. He said to me, Reece, you're a really likeable young man. You're very intelligent. You should come out. If you're ever over in Spain, he lived in Fuengirola, which is just out on the outskirts of Marbella. You should come out and see me. Well, I was going to Spain. I've always wanted to go to Marbella. So I thought, kill two birds with one stone. I took his number when he gave it me. I subsequently moved wing. And I didn't really think about him much. He didn't, Frank, when I talk to you about this guy, he's so important in what comes in my life. When you've seen him, if you'd have seen him, you would have honestly thought he was someone's granddad. He just was very unassuming gent, wore moccasins and a barber jacket. And you would have honestly just thought he was a guy who'd just been caught up in this signature default, done well for himself from being a banker. He's got a house in Spain, just says, you're a young lad, if you're ever in Spain, give us a shout. It's jail talk, that's what I thought. But I took him up on his offer anyway. I get released, license is finished. Day after my home office prison license ended, I went to Marbella with my granddad. Went out there for the long weekend. I rung the phone. I said, I'll refer to him as the banker. That's how I don't want to name him because it's obviously he's got a family and stuff, and there's obviously something that's happened quite recently, which I don't want to be bringing his name into the mud about that. But I'll refer to him as the banker, and I said, I'm over here. I'm in Port Banús. Come down. Let's have a chat. He says, all right, I'll come and see you. I'm in Port Banús tomorrow. So I said, all right, that's sound. So I went and met him. I just thought these guys were just elderly gents who had made a few quid, being bankers or whatever. I didn't really understand that these guys were actually involved in drug dealing in a massive capacity. They were the finances behind drug dealing. And I was sat there. We went on a yacht, 50 million euro yacht. They took me out. We're drinking champagne. It was fantastic. I just thought they were just, business people who've done well. And I obviously knew there was an undercurrent in Marbella, but I didn't really realise the significance of it. And get chatting to these guys, and then the conversation when we got out to sea was, what's the bird everyone's done then? Well, I obviously knew what bird meant. And I said, well, I've done about 5 in total behind the door. And when we'd finished, there was about, 6 or 7 of us. And it had turned out with the sentence that some of these old boys had done, some of them had done 20-year sentences in that, Frank. And I thought, you're not getting 20 years for being a disgraced banker. So I kind of realised at that point that this were a heavy mob, you know what I mean? But they were older, and I carried on drinking, and then the conversation changed to more around the importation of drugs. Obviously, Spain, down the Costa del Sol is the gateway to from like Africa and all that. And it turned out that these boys were obviously involved in serious smuggling back to the UK and Ireland. And obviously, I was listed. I'm not taking it on board. It's not to do with me. And they basically said to me, do you know anyone in Britain who we can strike up a contact with? And I said, no, I didn't want anything to do with it. And I realised at that point that the banker wasn't the elderly gentleman that I thought he was. That he was actually involved in serious organised crime. And he became a really close friend and advisor, and he showed me a lot of ways to make money. But I'm not really going to go into that much, Frank. And, I went back out to Spain and a few times, and I seen him and spoke to him on the phone 2 or 3 times a week. And he was a really proper, significant role in my life, that man was. And he subsequently got caught up in a gangland dispute, and he was basically lured to Bulgaria under false pretenses, and he was murdered last year. And it had a really significant effect on me because he'd been such a close friend and advocate to me, that I kind of looked at my life at the time, and I started looking at ways to better my life and change my life. And I found I was always on the verges of wanting to change and not wanting to continue it. I had a son around the same time. He was born 8 weeks early, and he was in a neonatal unit, and I seen him in there. He was £2.12 when he was born.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, Frank, it scared the shit out of me. I seen my little son there. Unexpected. Came as a great surprise and a shock when he was born, because we didn't think, it took quite a long time for us to realise that my girlfriend at the time was pregnant, because he was so small. And then all of a sudden she goes for a routine appointment, and then he's born. You know what I mean? I was like, you know, what's happening? He's in this neonatal unit. My mental health had never really picked up from prison and the time before, the breakup from my girlfriend at the time, the bouncers, going back to prison, Marbella, all these things are going on in my head. Then this baby's arrived. I'm thinking, fucking hell, how am I going to provide for the baby? My girlfriend at the time had fallen out for mum, so I found that I was fully responsible for this girl and this child, that I had to do some things to get some money together, because I said from the day dot that girl will never have to struggle, and that child will never have to suffer on him coming into the world, that he doesn't have everything he needs. So I got a few £1,000s together, and I went to Mama's and Papa's with my girlfriend, and we bought everything for him. And then he was born about 2 weeks later, this unexpected, birth. And it knocked me for 6, Frank. Seeing all them poorly babies in there, and my son there, and he breathed on his own and everything. And he's such a little fighter and such a little spirit that, you know, it changed. I was already on the verges of changing my life, and it just gave me that little kick up the arse that I needed.
Yeah.
That I had this child who was fully dependent on me, that I really needed to change my life in some way.
Has this led to what you're doing now? Has that been? That's the catalyst. Oh, good. Oh, that's good.
Yeah, this is the leader.
How are you? I know. I read recently that you're getting involved with a very significant campaign.
Yeah.
You know? And we'll give him a mention, Mark.
Mark's a good guy.
Our mutual friend Mark.
Yeah.
And I've seen you've been meeting and trying to get that initiative started. Can you give us a brief explanation of what that is and what stage you are at the moment?
Yeah, so obviously from my son being born, I decided that enough was enough, and I seized all contact with some of the boys in Spain, and you know, I just said, I'm not about this. I'm moving on. I've got this kid, and I thought, right, what can I do now? And it took me back to Marbella again. So I was really depressed at my son's birth, that I went into boxing, and I went back out to Marbella, and I went to MTK, but it's now called the Real Paddle Club, and I trained out there for about 2 or 3 weeks, and you know, I got my health back on track, and I came back. I was training, and with a view to going professional, but then COVID came, knocked me for 6 again. So I was in a catch-22 with this COVID. I was thinking, right, I can pick up the phone now, and I can make some good money. I can get back on the track with lads in Spain, and I can do a few things, and I can push some things around, and I can make some money. This boxing career that I'm being pursuing has been halted in its tracks because of this. He's taking me to Spain. I've invested all my money into it, all the training and everything that you need. And I thought, or I go down another direction. So I was kind of looking at what I can do, and I got involved with Inside Connections, which is John Burton. He also does podcasts. And I just basically put it on thick to John. I said, John, I understand. I really appreciate your story. It touches so many nerves with me that, can you help me? I know what you're doing is fantastic. Have you got any courses or anything that I can do? And he said, yeah, I'll put you on a fibre optics course. So he put me on a fibre optics course through Inside Connections. And I was so inspired by his work and how far we'd come. I think he got 18 years for some offences. I don't want to say what I think it is, just in case it's wrong, but some offences he got 18 years for. And he was in prison, and he changed his life in prison, and he started planning this Inside Connections. And now he puts reformed criminals into work. And I was listening to his story. I made contact with him, and he put me on this course, and he got me the qualifications in fibre optics, and I couldn't thank him enough for it. And it just gave me a little kick up the arse, Frank, as everything's led to that. And I thought, do I want to do fibre optics, or do I want to be like John? And I thought, I feel more passionate about crime and reform than I do about the fibre optics. So it kind of like led me on a different path. But I was so thankful that he got me and took an interest in me and got me that qualification. Really appreciate, hands off. And I became an ambassador for Change Life, Put Down Your Knife with Ben Span and all them boys. So that kind of then led on to that. And I did a sponsored walk for him and raised some money. And I thought, this is great, this. I actually was feeling like I was really doing something that was changing things. And cut a long story short, Frank, I started writing the book. That's going to be released soon.
Yeah, I was going to mention that,
Yeah, A Journey Through the Madness. That'll be released in a couple of weeks' time. And I've got this ambassador role. And I thought, Mark had been then sent to prison again for something that happened years ago. But Mark had changed his life around, prior to this. And I was so disappointed that the judge wouldn't understand what we were saying. But Mark got a decent sentence. And I wrote to Mark throughout his sentence. And I said, he had the same idea as me. I said, I've been to Marbella, I've done all this shit, my son, boxing, all these things. I'm looking to invest all my time and energy into creating something with you, Mark, if you want to do it, if you're on the same tracks as me. And we wrote together through prison. We've been friends for about 15 years, me and Mark, and we decided to come put our heads together. We've both successfully changed our life. We've both been through some shit. Mark's got his own story, which is an incredible story that he's got. And we decided to put this thing together called Changing the Narrative, because that's what we want to do. We want to change the narrative. So we've set up a charity, me and Mark. We're in the process of obviously going through all that. We've got meetings with MPs. As I've been on this Zoom call, I've seen some messages coming through them from Mark that we've got a really important meeting. We're going to Downing Street in a month's time on the 14th of February to submit a petition to submit a bill to change the law and how victims of county lines are actually being viewed as perpetrated, to change that and to bring out an understanding. So this initiative that we're doing, we're obviously in its early stages, but we're kicking down all the right doors, and it's all perfectly legal and legit. And me and Mark are completely and utterly committed, both of us, and passionate about bringing about change to how ex-offenders are viewed. I know obviously they're not an initiative doing this, but I think we're doing it with a bit of a difference, and we're actually going down and we're actually doing something. Like I say, we've been invited to Downing Street on the 14th. So it's a really great way to end all that shit that I had to go through, is now to say that we've been invited to Downing Street, Frank, to submit a bill to change the law when we've actually.
Well, look, you can take. I think you have a look at yourself and take a bit of pride in what you're doing, and I think that'll inspire you even more.
Definitely,
if you focus on that, and I say it every time, I say it every episode. We want to gain access to real and inspiring people. You've been as real as you can get, and you've been as honest as you can. Under certain circumstances, and you've opened up. Some of your feelings, your emotions. Discussed your psychological state at different times. And that's the inspirational stuff, isn't it? It's what you're doing now. It's clearly inspiring you. Definitely. That can only be a good thing. And it's clearly going to help other people. It's going to inspire them to. I call it getting off the treadmill. Get off the treadmill and look at where you've been, and judge whether you want to get back on that treadmill again. And you clearly don't. And that's a massive positive. So I'm just going to repeat what I said at the beginning. I'm just going to thank our sponsors for today, which are, again, I'll show the T-shirt off. Thanks for their support. We clearly want to help them as much as we can. We also want to mention again, our mutual interest in Change Your Life, Put Down Your Knife. Certainly, carry focusing on that. And Ben and the rest of the boys are doing a great job there. Again, yeah, Simon's, Society, the great job that they're doing. I want to thank Gary from Mack the Hat Media again, but mostly I want to thank you. I want you to come in on today. It's I say you are the youngest person, and you've certainly crammed a lot in
a short period of time.
Politically young life, Yeah. And we do appreciate you coming and sharing that. And hopefully some younger people will avoid some of the pitfalls, if you like, for want of a better word.
Yeah. And, could I just say a special thank you to some people as well, if that's all right?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, of course, yeah.
I want to, I know this probably sounds crazy, but I want to thank the judges in my case that sentenced me to prison. I want to thank them, because if I hadn't have gone through them experiences, I wouldn't be where I am now, and I wouldn't be in a position to be able to actively seek to change other people's lives. So I can't honestly thank them enough for that, for giving me, obviously sending me to these places has reformed me. I reformed myself. I want to say a massive thank you to Mark Carlton, because without him and his support, and he supported me through every sentence I've been, he's been a very, very good friend to me. And I can't appreciate him enough for all the work he's doing with changing narrative and keeping things ticking along. A huge thank you to Ben Spann for taking me on as an ambassador role, which has obviously been a massive part of this journey. And a massive thank you to you as well, Frank, because this is the first podcast I've done. Obviously, I'm quite nervous when I did it, because it's quite nerve-wracking, but thank you for opening the door on that one for me, and being able to tell this story. And I hope that people can get some light from my darker days, and can listen to this and can seek this, young lads especially, who can read this and relate to this and don't really make the same choices I made. Because the truth is, and this is how I want to end it, is I have wasted, we all do things. A lot of people commit crime for material things. And this jumper I'm wearing is material. And it keeps me warm. It costs quite a lot of money. But if it somehow rips now, I would be able to go and buy another one. But the one thing I'll never get back, and that is my biggest regret. I obviously regret a lot of the crimes I've committed, but my biggest regret is time. Because I've wasted a lot of my time on the wrong people, and time's a great healer, and I've healed with time. And that bitterness and sourness that I had, that I should be a millionaire and I should be entitled to this and that, and it didn't happen for me, Frank. It doesn't happen for a lot of people. But what I'm doing now is I'm opening that door, and I want people to understand that you'll never get back that time. So be careful and be very cautious of the time that you spend and where you spend it. Yeah.
Well, listen, mate, you certainly have been real today, and you've certainly been inspiring. Wish you all the best with the book. Make sure you keep us informed about that, because we can always mention that, during other podcasts. We've had some great guests on in the past, and we do like to follow their progress, and we always make a point of saying if there's anything we can do along the way to promote what you're doing, keep us informed so that we can do that. So once again, when you see Mark, give him Mark, obviously. And in the meantime, we wish you all the best, Mark.
Thank you, pal.
You're more than welcome. Cheers, pal. See you later.
See you later.